Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, man. Welcome back. Welcome back. Like we just were on a commercial break or something. This is only coming up on show 20. You'd think that we'd actually be able to start a show the proper way.
No, but it's good because it makes it sound like we just had like weather and traffic at the top of the hour. So
Les Nessman was
that's it. WKRP.
So, lots of good comments about Bhrett McCabe from last week. It's interesting. We talked about it, but Bhrett, I think we could have probably just done a whole show just on LSU baseball and stories from the past and, World Series days and those types of things. It would have been just fine just to do something like that.
Yeah, I agree. Anytime like we've talked about, I mean, the behind the scenes stuff, the things that make sports and make teams click, I think always interest. I know they interest me. Hopefully they kind of interest the listeners as well. But it's the product is always what you see out on the field, but it's not those 2 or 3 hours of what you see that really goes into a team and all that. And it's funny because watching whether it's college football or whatever, you seem to get a lot more, using college football as an example, you seem to get a lot more, armchair quarterbacks. Everybody has an opinion. Mm-hmm. And, this kid should be starting and that kid should be starting, and can't understand why the team's so talented and what in the world is going on. And, you never know what that culture looks like. And so to hear somebody like Dr. Bhrett talk about how Skip Bertman really built that culture and the things that he found to be important and therefore was going to make sure that the team had value in those. That's the kind of stuff that just I love to listen to.
And it's a great point you make about the amount that all of the behind the scenes stuff. I always laugh when people are like, well, so and so should be starting. You mentioned that comment is, there's a reason they're not starting, right? They don't practice well. They just aren't prepared in meetings. I mean, whatever the case may be, there's always a reason, but to the average fan who's just watching the ball game, it's easy to be that armchair quarterback, like you said, and say, oh, well, this kid should be starting. You think about this, Brandon, when we played, and this goes for every college athlete, but when we played, if you look back on the years that we were in college, 90%, only probably about 10% of the time that we were in school are you actually playing games. Like 90% of your time is spent practicing. It's spent off-season workouts. You spend so much time around your teammates for all these years. But the reality of it is 90% of the time, it's a very small percentage, I guess a better way to say it, of time that you're actually on the field playing a game.
What do you think the statute of limitations is, though, for my Spanish 3 teacher to realize that I wasn't necessarily
I forgot about that. That was your go-to.
Hey, sorry, got a game. I know it's an 8:00 in the morning class on Tuesday, Thursday. But I got to be out
we're
at
in
the
December.
Field. Yeah, I got to be out at the field. But thank you.
Yeah, Coach. I tell you, he doesn't stand for excuses. I mean, I know this is a big semester
test,
exam.
Yeah, ¿Dónde está biblioteca? So You're right though, John. Like it's that kind of stuff that people don't always get to see. You don't realize, how a very talented individual can sometimes be a cancer to a club. You don't see, and look, there certainly there are times, especially when you talk about big athletics, money making types of sports, and I think the listeners need to remember too. Like, I know at one point, and it wasn't that long ago, I think there were 10 or 11 programs that were actually making money for their school. Football as an endeavor, and college athletics as an endeavor, usually, take a lot. So you don't. There's always sometimes political things. There's always something, right? But I think it's that those things are the things that really kind of you turn back into what we're talking about here from a mental performance standpoint. You go, hey, look, you've got to take ownership. If you're not playing, you really have to evaluate and take inventory of why am I not out there? And it's like I tell all my kids that are playing, hey man, I'm never having that conversation with a coach about playing time. I'm just not. Like,
right.
In my mind, you should be doing whatever it is to take any reason or doubt off of the table, right?
Yeah. And that's how you have that conversation with a coach. You players that are listening, or even parents of players that are struggling with that, play or participation issue, is you take that conversation off the table by what you just said, by your effort that you're putting forth in practice, the preparation that you come and bring to, how much extra work you're putting in or whatever. That's the conversation right there. It doesn't always have to take the form of you going up and asking a coach, why am I not playing? And I tell players all the time, that's not the question anyhow. If you right. do have reached that point where you feel like you're going to have that conversation, the question is, what can I do, or what do I need to do in addition to what I'm already doing? But it's not, why am I not?
No. Because once you ask why, then you are not controlling the controllable.
That's right.
So it's, it's one of those things that we always talk about, EAT, right? For the teams that I coach, it's effort, attitude, and toughness, whether it's physical or mental. We know what that requires. So those are all controllable items and things that a player can, show up every day and pour themselves into. The rest of it, you can't. It
reminds me of something that I had found. I meant to ask Dr. McCabe, Bhrett, about this when we had him on the show, but he had posted something on his social media platform. It must have been months ago, but it really caught my attention. It was called a 30-day test or something like that. It basically, he said, if you look back at the last 30 days as a husband, as a employee, as a player, if you're a player who's playing on a team or whatever, ask yourself, if the last 30 days was the only indicator, would my coach still recruit me? Would my wife still, or husband still marry me? Would my employer still hire me? Like, you should always constantly be evaluating. We talk about assessing on this show all the time, but you should always be going through that self-assessment and asking yourself that question of, keeping yourself honest. Would these people still choose me is really the question, right?
Right.
On the last 30 days. And I think it's a really good kind of test for yourself to just ask that question periodically.
Oh, I think it is. And like we've talked about, it requires, though, for you to be honest. I mean, that requires some true honesty, and ownership again, right? So, I mean, I could easily be like, sure, that thing the other day, that wasn't my fault, or, he made me mad or she made me mad. And that's why I acted out that way. And instead of just
the Chick-fil-A and McDonald's discussion has gotten a lot of comments from people, which I thought is it's so spot on when he talked about that and just the difference in cultures there. And as you're holding your Chick-fil-A cup,
it's why we stopped there. That's why we stopped there tonight after practice.
That's right. But I love where he says, it's the same talent pool that's out there. Like the people who work at McDonald's are coming from the same group of people that Chick-fil-A hires. It's just they train them up differently. They prepare them differently, and that's really a big thing. So
and then the things that I've heard you talk to your teams about too, from a cultural standpoint, it's they just don't accept a lower standard. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It won't be tolerated. So
that's exactly right. No, absolutely. So good news. This week, I thought we would do something a little bit different with our show, where it's just the two of us. I wanted to share some questions and comments. We go to the mailbag, so to speak. So it's interesting. One of the comments and this really, I mean, for those of you who do this and you leave messages and you send in emails or you post comments on different social media platforms, it really does make our day.
Sure. I mean, we've got a friend of mine and of the show, Robert Hatch, right? That posted a really good
it was awesome.
Comment. Yeah.
So what Brandon's talking about is there was a question posed this week in one of the many Facebook groups that are out there. And the question was, what's your favorite self-improvement book, podcast, YouTube, etc.? And this question got 933 comments. And one of the comments was from your boy, Robert Hatch, who tagged us in his answer and said, the Mental Advantage podcast is outstanding podcast. Awesome. Which is really cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Robert, for that love. We also got a new Apple podcast review this week, 5 stars, which this I think brings a total up to about 13 or 14 reviews, which those are always nice. And I just would, kind of was checking those before the show. Matthew Simon said this is a great podcast for learning about mental performance mastery. JC and BA do a great job interviewing their guests and extracting the nuggets that you need to advance your mental game. So, I mean, look, that's what the podcast is all about. So I guess, mission accomplished as far as Matthew goes. And we appreciate him listening. And then I wanted to share a couple of letters with you. You ready for these? So
yeah, I guess so.
These got some questions that come with them. So I'll start with the first one because I think this will be pretty funny. This first letter is from Mickey Olson in Fairfax, Virginia, so not too far from where I used to live. The question is, what is one of the funniest memories you all have from your days of playing college baseball?
Is there one that's more serious that we could kind of knock out?
It's so I'll tell you one while you're thinking of one. Okay. One of my favorite memories that I tell this story all the time is we would go down every year and play Florida International, and we were coming back from Miami one year, and the pitchers. So for the listeners, our pitchers always took a radar gun with them to, record the speeds and stuff of the pitches throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, they were charting, pitches. Right? The pitcher for Saturday or Sunday would be up in the stands, and they would chart pitches, and they would have the radar gun, and they would basically prepare themselves for the next day, because that at the time is what technology would allow for.
Right. And by design, that was what they were supposed to do. A lot of times you might look up there and they might be eating, popcorn or whatever.
All the time. They were always eating.
So, but they did have a radar gun, which proved to be really funny tool for us as we were coming back from Miami one year. And we were on I-95, which anybody who's ever traveled I-95, I always say is the Audubon of America. And I mean, if you're going 80, 85 miles an hour, people are flashing their lights. Yeah. They're like, hey, move over. But so the pitchers decided they would get the radar gun out during our trip back from Miami to Charleston. And they were, every time a car would go by, especially the faster looking cars, they would test to see if they had a radar detector by squeezing the trigger on the radar gun. That's and as soon as they would squeeze the trigger, you would see brake lights coming on, and you would see the car would like pull over to the right-hand lane really quickly. And the only other car on the straightaway most of the time was just this College of Charleston bus, and then them. That's and they were trying to figure out what is going on. Is this a helicopter? Is it, what's happening here? And then it was so great because everybody would be huddled around as they're like holding this radar gun in the hall in the aisle of the bus, and you'd see the car start to pull away, and they'd be like, wait, and then they'd squeeze the trigger again, and you'd see the brake lights come on, and they would pull back over.
That is very funny.
Yeah, always a good time.
It's an interesting question. I have the off the field stuff that's the kind of stuff that stands out the most.
Yeah. The trips to Blockbuster looking for video games.
But not just that, but like the, stopping for pizza or when we would stop at Ryan's Steakhouse, like as we frequently did. And we had one player who we made sure it was their birthday every time. And so
everyone just learned to go with it.
Yeah. It's like, all right, Copenhagen, it's your birthday again. Happy birthday. Yeah. So it's stuff like that I kind of remember. But since that question was posed to the two of us, I will, I'm going to probably say the South Carolina State.
Oh my gosh! I knew you were going to tell this story.
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, at this point you had torn your labrum, and you were kind of rehabbing, but you were also being a grad assistant.
Yep.
If I remember right, we had left or went to play South Carolina State, which is just up in Orangeburg, so an hour and a half away.
Just a weekday little game.
A game. And if I remember, it was near the end of the semester, and several guys decided not to travel because of exams.
Right.
I also remember us stopping at a Hardee's. And it's
the pregame meal of champions.
Always the frisky chisky. And I remember already being kind of sick. Well, as dumb luck would have it, I decided to pull my best Italian fountain imitation during the 9-inning game because it was coming out of everywhere. I mean, but they actually had a bathroom for whatever reason
out in right
field. So I would run between innings, literally just be out in the can until it was my turn to hit. I would come in. I'd go either back to the outfield or back to the bathroom. It was an awful game.
Yes.
Needless to say, though, they had apparently hired or grabbed a couple of the players, either parents or uncles, from the stands to be the umpires.
It was awful. Unbelievable.
Really bad. And I remember it was a 3-0 count, and you were sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, pitcher's bucket, full of baseballs. And the pitch literally was over my head, and the guy goes, strike one. And to the point I turned around and looked, which is, for those of y'all that don't know, that's really kind of a no-no. You don't want to show the umpire up. Well, my boy pops off of the bucket, and
it was on.
He's ready. I mean, John Cullen's going to let that umpire know he ain't having it today. And he starts ripping into the guy. And I mean, he's he's letting them have it pretty good, to the point that I'm now laughing in my at bat. Like it's pretty funny. To the next pitch, I'm laughing so hard I can't swing. And I shouldn't have swung. It was in the dirt. And he called strike 2.
Yes.
To which you then were like, you lost it. And you stand up.
It was at that point. There's no turn back.
Exactly. And you're letting them have it. And I am so proud of you. And I'm like, man, this dude's got my back. And all the umpire did was take his mask off and said, that's enough. I've heard enough. You're like, yes, sir. It was like you just took an order from your commanding officer. There was no fight. There was
nothing. I folded like a bad chair.
And I thought, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All he needed was a little resistance.
I can take it. I can only go as far as I can with you. The rest is up to you.
No, I knew
it was hilarious. It was
very funny.
Memorable game for sure.
But it was definitely one of those things, though, that in all seriousness, you look back and I go, it's stuff like that where as a friend and then even as like a somebody that knows coaching and what you're looking for out of a coach, that was one of those times I was like, you know what, like Cullen's going to be an amazing coach because he takes up for his kids. He's supportive. He's doing all the right things. Granted, he got bullied.
Right. And up to a point. He's in your corner
to a point, and then he's not so great.
He may even turn on you.
He's super supportive, but you may not want to rob a bank with him. No, in all seriousness, it's one of those things where, and there were other instances. I remember, I think I kind of tweaked a hamstring at Central Florida or somebody, and they started barking. And I remember you turning around and kind
oh, yeah. I was coaching first base at the time, because that was my duties. Once I got into the coaching side of it, and you were actually played the next year where I wasn't even eligible.
Right.
And that was funny because I think that was the year actually we were down in Orlando against Central Florida, and I was coaching first base. And man, I mean, I tell you what, people talk all the time, and we've discussed this is, baseball is a boring game. When you're down there, it is, first of all, some of the chatter that's coming out of the dugout, some of the chatter that's coming from the fans. Remember the guy at Georgia Tech who's like, just ruthless on everybody.
I mean, just all of them. I mean, Georgia Tech, Florida State. You look
South
back
Carolina,
and so to bring that all around, as a fan, when you're doing it, it's never personal,
right?
Until it is, because at some point as a player, you mentally have to be tough enough to realize, hey, look, they're out here, they're having a good time.
Right.
I mean, that,
and they're here watching me. They're not, I'm not here watching them.
And I mean, a different story for a different time. I remember being down we were at Jackson State, right? We were headed out to, I think, Centenary or whatever.
Yep, Centenary.
And the guy's just barking. And finally I just said, hey man, what's it going to take for you to shut up? Like, he just jabberjawing. And I remember being on deck and just, he just wouldn't stop. And he was like, I tell you what, he goes, how about you hit a home run and I'll shut up. I won't say another word and I'll get on my knees and bow to you. And as the good Lord wanted it to be, the first pitch. And I made really good contact. And I remember hitting first base and just looking at him like, you're trapped, dude.
Yeah.
Like, we're done. And he did. He
honored his promise.
He honored. And the funny thing is, and not only did he honor it, then he kind of became a fan. right?
Yeah.
But from a mental perspective, you do have to find a way to kind of be tough and compartmentalize and
it's all noise. I mean,
right,
it's all clutter.
exactly,
it's all
right.
The mental clutter that Bhrett McCabe talks about is, clearing that mental clutter, and it's all part of it. And, for the listeners, we're of course having some fun here, reminiscing a little bit about some of these college stories, but it's everything. I mean, your mind can do the same thing to you that fan can do. It can put those thoughts in your head. It can be chirping nonstop, putting some negative thoughts in there, and you just have to clear it. You have to focus on what you can control, stay in the present moment, and not get too carried away with all of it. Because just like with those fans, when you ignore them or are indifferent to them, I heard Aaron Rodgers say one time that the way he handles any fans or negative press or whatever is he kills them with indifference. When you think about it, just being indifferent to somebody is the best way to shut them up, because it's the same thing with our thoughts. So let me tell you about this last, speaking of that, I'll share one more letter here, and then we'll kind of tell you all about the guest coming up for this week. But so this letter is from Eric Coleman in upstate New York, and he says, "I love the show. A friend turned me on to this show when Todd Setner was on, and hats off, by the way, to Todd Setner. He's just doing amazing things with that book that he has out there right now, But when Todd Setner was on, and I've been faithful listener ever since, you guys have made mental performance entertaining, and I always enjoy the guests. I would love to see you all get more athletes or coaches on the show. So would we, Eric. Thanks for noticing that, but still enjoy what you all are doing. Question, any suggestions on breaking a bad habit? So this is nice segue from Eric, because it's actually something I've been meaning to talk about on this show for a little while now, because I believe everybody deals with bad habits. And the thing that I talk about a lot is habit loops. So when you think about a habit loop, with every habit, you've got a trigger, you've got the routine and action that's a result of that trigger, and then whatever reward you get from that routine or action. So oftentimes these habit loops occur on a subconscious level. You think of like a traffic light, for example. You see a green light is the trigger. You drive through the intersection. That's the routine or action that you have. And then the reward is you get closer to your destination. It's the brain's way of conserving energy, because it's not having to think about, these things, and it allows your brain to basically focus on other processes. Some people might call it autopilot, for example. But I want to give you a couple of examples of this for the listener. So here, one example would be a referee. I'm going to give you a negative example for an athlete. So the trigger would be a referee makes a bad call. The routine or habit from that is the athlete then throws their hands up in the air, gets really frustrated, gets angry, lets everybody in the world, in the stadium or in the arena, know that they're frustrated about this, and they say something like, "What, are you kidding me?" or something like that. Right. The reward for that athlete is that everybody knows they're frustrated. They feel they got cheated and want everyone to feel sorry for them. And right?
It's not their fault.
Not their fault at all. It's the referee's fault. And so everybody in the whole place knows it's not my fault. So a positive, let me give that same example in a positive habit loop. So same trigger, referee makes a bad call. This time, though, the player has good body language. They have positive self-talk. And in their mind, they're thinking, good, you know what? Give them that call. I'll get the next one. They take a deep breath, associate their exhale with letting go of that. And then the reward is they're able to better focus on the next possession. They're staying in that present moment. So to answer Eric's question, I wanted to give everybody a good example from a nutritional standpoint, because this is something everybody deals with all the time. So here's a bad habit that a lot of us, and I will include myself in here from time to time, have, is the trigger being you're hungry. It's late at night. It's 9:00. You're getting ready to watch TV. It's very easy. You head into the pantry and you get a bag of Doritos or whatever your snack of choice is, and you find something. That's right.
Pot
pies and stuffing.
Stuffing.
and you fill up on this. That's that trigger of it being 9:00 at night watching TV triggers your routine or action of that bag of Doritos. You eat it while you're watching TV. The reward is that sudden surge of dopamine, which makes you feel happy. And now, it feels good, and you've handled that hunger issue. Mm-hmm. So I want everyone to think about that. So what we do on a daily basis is we have these habit loops, these subconscious things that are going on. The key is, and this is where I think Eric's trying to get to, is how do you break that habit? The key is you don't eliminate the habit. You replace the action. So you still are going to use the same trigger, and you'll still probably have the same reward for a lot of these things. It's just you've identified this habit loop, and now you replace that middle part, which is that routine or action. So what we call habit stacking. So habit stacking is just simply the process of existing habits, replacing that existing habit, and building a new habit. So the example back to Doritos would be, instead of buying something, first of all, get rid of the Doritos, right? That would be the first thing to prepare yourself to fix this. But let's say instead of Doritos, you get celery and a little bit of peanut butter, or you get some air popped popcorn, or something that's a little bit more of a healthier, snack. And then what you have is same trigger, but this time when you get that hunger pain at 9 p.m., you're watching TV. The new habit or routine is they go to the pantry and they grab something that's healthy. Maybe it's an apple, whatever the case would be. They're still going to get the same reward, because the reward of that surge of dopamine and that feeling of happiness because something tastes good, and now is you're taking care of that hunger pain, is still going to be there. It's just the one thing in that habit loop you've changed is the routine or action. So just recognize when you have a bad habit, the secret isn't more self-discipline. It's actually just identifying and breaking the habit loop. So I just wanted to unpack that a little bit. And I'll leave you guys with this. It's kind of a 3-step process. When you want to break a bad habit, identify the habit you want to change. Identify the trigger, routine, action, and reward. So think about it in those 3 steps, and then adjust the routine or action. So it's that middle part. You're still going to have the same triggers. Yep. You're still hopefully going to have the same reward from it, but it's just that middle part, that routine or action, that you're going to replace. So
awesome.
Yeah, good stuff there. And just something that's easy to do.
Yeah. Man, I love that we're getting some feedback though too. That's awesome. I'd say keep it, keep coming.
Podcast at mentaladvantage.net. Keep the emails coming. And that's what we have in mind when we put that email address out, is just you guys having a question about something, or just, and you see there with, what was the person's name? Mickey Olson, that just asked about, what are some funny memories? And trust me, there's a lot more stories Brandon and I could tell. But that was probably a different show on a different time of, time. Sure. Yeah. But, so let's talk, as we close up here. Aaron Goodson from Mississippi State's our guest this week. He's the assistant director for counseling and sports psychology, and, a lot like Bailey Nevels and Marcia Edwards from Clemson, and really even to some degree Bhrett McCabe, in the sense that Dr. Goodson's got experience working in 2 college counseling centers, has over 1,000 hours of performance consulting with athletes in various sports ranging in age, experience, and skill level. But one of the things I'm interested to hear him talk about is impact theory or impact therapy, because that's his kind of specialty he was trained in. And what impact therapy is basically just puts the client at the center of their therapeutic process, and allows for them to serve as the guide in their own treatment and growth. So really kind of finding out some of the different approaches that they're using with the athletes down there at Mississippi State.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. It continues to amaze me, the number of professionals out there that are really, really helping and helping students and focusing on the mental health aspect of it. I love it. I think it's great. I wish that, and hope that it continues to grow the way that it seems to be growing. But it's great to have professionals out there, not just for the athletes too, right?
Right.
And this is just for everybody in their own mental well-being.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, when we were coming through, these are difference makers. And so when we were coming through, it's this kind of old recruiting arms race, if you will. First, it was facilities. Everyone's building the bigger facilities. When we were playing, it was, who had the better strength and conditioning programs, who had the better, facilities are always going to be there, but it was always that, like, what can we do as a program to get that edge? And I think, to your point, a lot of these schools are starting to look at mental performance, just in general, mental health for the player is one kind of, bucket. And then also that mental performance side as well.
There's no doubt. And it's one of those things, John, where, and like we've talked to several of our guests, it's very easy to see the result of a great strength and conditioning program. It's very easy to see the result of, a really good coaching staff. It's not always easy to see the result of a great mental performance coach or a department, right, that's helping student athletes. But what we are starting to see through the clinical research and all of that, it's that these kids are able to perform at a very high level for extended periods of time because they're mentally capable and mentally tough, as well as physically capable and tough. And there's a law of diminishing return on the physical side. I mean, we are getting to a point to where, as just a specimen of an individual, can only run so fast, can only lift so much, can only do so many physical things. But, for us, where you hear stories or hear studies where we're only tapping into a very low percent of what our brain can actually do. Yeah. That's the growth area. That's where it's at. I mean, I'm excited to hear the guests this week and guests that we have coming down the road as well, because that really is where the growth is at. And
absolutely, and again, guys, I mean, and I hope this continues to be made clear, is we always kind of gravitate, just by nature of the guests that we have on, towards some of those athletes. But so much of this stuff, I mean, as far as that mental edge, is what will get you through life. It's going to get you from that employee standpoint. And speaking of guests coming down the road, I would be remiss not to mention that our boy, Dr. Mo Pickens, is coming back on next week for the second part in the Grand Slam series as we go into the PGA Championship coming up. So he will be back next week for his interview in that second part of that series, where he's going to talk about off the course and some of the things that he works with those golfers on as they lead up to some of these tournaments, which will be very timely. And we have some good questions for him as well. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. Looking forward to our talk with Dr. Goodson later in the week, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.